Hello everyone, and today we will be painting one of my favourite miniatures from possibly the entirety of the Trench Crusade range, the Brazen Bull. Now this has been primed in Colourforge Matte Black Primer, as you can see up in the top corner here. I'll just move that out of the way so we have more room later. And also, if you remember in the building video that I did for this, I used green stuff, liquid green stuff, to seal this crack in his arm there, so we shouldn't have any problems with that. So, let's talk about the brushes I'll be using today. So I have my Redgrass Games wet palette here with me, and again, although I've been mentioning a number of different companies and different paint ranges, I am not affiliated with any of them at this time, and my opinions on these paints, the brushes, etc. are all my own. I'm not paid to promote any of these, and I have not been asked to include them in any of my videos. So, my Redgrass Games wet palette. Then I have a Army Painter Masterclass Moderate Dry Brush. I'll just turn that the right way up. There you are. It's brand new as well, so I get to christen this today. I've used them before. They're very good brushes. I just didn't look after one of mine properly, so I needed a new set. Then my trusty Citadel Shade Brush, which I used in the video where we painted the Witch Burner. My Winsor & Newton 1. And I also have, rather oddly, some cotton buds, and we'll come back to those right at the end of the video. So remember, you need a few cotton buds for this. And let's go over the paints. So we have Rakarth Flesh, which will be our flesh tones. Guilliman Flesh, which will also help the flesh tones. Carroburg Crimson for some of our reds. Contrast Black Templar. Our golds will be done in Citadel Retributor armour. We'll also be using Reikland Flesh Shade, Null Oil, which is almost run out, Lead Belcher, Flesh Tearer's Red Contrast, and I have here Scale Colour Black from scale 75. That's just in case I need to redo any of the black paint on the miniature. And my last paint of today isn't really technically a paint, it's more of a wax, but it's the AK Interactive True Metallics Old Bronze, and that's going to help us with our highlight colours for our golds. So, speaking of golds, there is a lot of gold on this miniature, and the golds I will be doing are all of the skirt, as you can see in the artwork that I'll put up on screen. All of the armour panels will be gold, including the gun. This sword will be in Lead Belcher. All of the skin tones will get a base of Rakarth Flesh, and then we're going to really go to town on making them look weeping and sore, so we'll be using all of those red tones that I spoke about earlier on. And then we'll be picking out small details in Flesh Tearer's Red, and also picking out these cables in red and then washing them down with Carroburg Crimson. So let's get started by defining our golds. For the golds, we're going to go with the dry brush. So again, as I was saying in one of my previous videos, get a very tiny amount of water on your brush, dab most of it off, and then rub it on the back of your hand. And if your brush feels sort of cool to the touch, you've got just about enough the right amount of water on there. So I just need a tiny dab more. Again, rub that off, and that feels about right to me. So what we're then going to do, open up our Retributor armour. It is one of our messiest phases of the whole mini. I just need a bit more paint on there. So that's why we're doing this first. And then we wick off the majority of that, so we don't have very much of that retributor armor left in our brush. And then we're just going to dry brush all of those golds. So as you can see, it lays on quite nicely, and we also get some quite nice defined steps in the sculpt. And there we have our base coated golds. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean off my dry brush. Now make sure when you clean off your dry brushes, if you're using metallic paints, that you use different paint water for metallics and non-metallics, as sometimes metallic flakes can bleed over into them. So I'll just clean off my brush, we'll pause the video there a second, and I'll be back when that's done. So there we have, nice clean dry brush, and my paint water's changed, and we're ready to go on to the next steps. So what we're now going to do is move over to the shade brush, or back to the retributor armor, and what we're going to do is go around the miniature to find any area that we haven't been able to reach with that dry brush. So in here, now I've dry brushed all the cables because that's going to form the basis of our reds later on. I find that gold is a very, very nice base for red colours, but I haven't been able to get into this cable here. I haven't been able to get into this part of the skirt here, and as I was dry brushing, part of the back of the neck here hasn't been hit. So go around your miniature, clean up all those areas, and we'll be back in a moment. And we're back. So now the miniature is all based in gold, and I've got into any of those small areas I wasn't able to reach before, as you can see there. Now I've left the bottom of this cable dark, that's fine, it doesn't really matter, and we're not going to be painting this piece of wood or the base today in this video. We'll be basing this in a video at a later date. So what we need to do now is go over the miniature and pick out all of our skin tones. With that in mind, we now need our rakarth flesh. So because this is a big miniature, I'll be using my large brush. However, I may need my smaller Winsor & Newton 1 in order to get into some of the finer areas and small crevices. So pick a large area first and let's work around those. Now this can go on quite messily at first, it doesn't really matter. We'll do a couple of coats, and there we are. So we're back with our rakarth flesh layer all down. Now what you might notice is, as you put rakarth flesh across the miniature, in some areas it seems like there's grey coming through, or you may have missed a bit of gold there, something like that. What we are going to do is not be too worried about that. What we do want to do though is, if there is a lot of gold like on the hand there, just make sure you're catching that and painting over it so that we can hide that gold. If you need more paint, get more paint. But also paint the hooves, and if you can, get into the skirt there and the back of the legs and into this crease here to get this back leg. If you can't reach into those areas, don't worry, because we primed it in black, it will mean that it will hide some of those things, and we can use the black as natural shadows for the miniature. So go around the model, check on how that base coat is doing. If it looks a bit patchy in some areas, that's fine, it doesn't matter. As you can see, mine's quite patchy here. Just try and make sure that you go around and clean up any of those bits of gold that are poking through. So here we are back again with our second coat of that skin tone down, and it's much more unified this time around, as you can see. Now what I've also done is I've gone back over both of the hooves, over the hand, cleaned up that gold as you can see there. There's still a little of the gold poking through on the hand, but don't worry about that. We've covered up any of those ports on the skin. That's fine, we'll be moving on to them next. So now we should have something that looks mainly like a very pallid skinned creature in very shiny gold armour. What we're now going to move on to is we can either go with lead belcher or retributor armour, and we can go with either of those, a mix of both or neither. But all we're going to do is go around the miniature and pick out any of these sigils that we want to, all of the ports that we can see that we've covered up with the rakarth flesh. I think I'm going to do the small ports in silver and the big pieces of symbols in gold, and then we'll also paint the blade of the Titan Zulfikar. Now we have something resembling a very ill Brazen Bull because he's very, very pallid. So we need to rectify that. But what we're going to do first, darken up his armour. So we're going to tape down a lot of this very bright gold. And we're going to do that by moving on to Reikland Flesh Shade. So Reikland Flesh Shade, we want very big blobs of this on a very full-bellied brush like my shade brush. Pick any area to start with on the miniature and just brush on to the gold. All of that Reikland Flesh Shade. Be warned though, it will take quite a while to dry because it is a very heavy wash, but we want it in all the recesses of that gold, including all of the cables that we based in gold. Just lather it on. Just try to make sure that it's not pooling anywhere. If it does, or it looks like it's about to form a big droplet and fall off the miniature, just catch it, move it somewhere else. And we're back, so most of that gold tone is starting to dry now. If you find there's still some areas that are pooling or it's drying quite slowly, all you need to do, just grab a bit of tissue and just dab it. And that will remove moisture from the area, but still allow you to keep some of that nice tone there. So as we can see, that gold now has a little more depth to it, and we're going to move on to the skin. So the skin we'll be using first off Guilliman flesh. Now I'll be moving back to my shade brush for this, and I would like 2 parts Guilliman flesh to 4 parts water, and you'll see that it is very, very thin. Now we want to get rid of some of that off of our brush, and then we go to the skin and just follow around the gold. Let this pool near the gold, because all that will do is help to tie the golds into the skin, and you could, if you wanted to, leave the skin there. Let that dry, and you'd have quite a nice skin tone for the Brazen Bull. Just keep moving the paint around, make sure it doesn't pool in any areas. Like me, you want your Brazen Bull to look very much like the artwork suggests, with weeping skin. We're going to go immediately into Carroburg Crimson, and we'll mix 1 brush of Carroburg Crimson into that Guilliman flesh that we've just had on the wet palette. So you can see now there, that was quite a dirty, bruised colour. And I'm going to go in to get a brush of water. I want that even thinner. And now I just dab along areas where I might want there to be a large area of soreness. So think about areas near those ports, near the muscles, near where the armour connects to the skin. And it will start to darken up the skin and make it look quite bruised. Make sure you get the legs. You don't need to get the hooves. We'll be doing the hooves later in the video. Hi guys, just lost a piece of the footage here. So what I was doing, as that's still wet, I go straight into Flesh Tearer's Red once I have that Guilliman flesh down, and then we start following the lines of the musculature to start putting in that soreness, and we'll join back with the clip in 3, 2, 1. Recesses and starts to pull because all of this paint layer is still wet. So we keep going back to those areas. If you get some on the gold, that's fine. Especially the gold around the chest or any of these ports. Sometimes you might even completely cover up a port. That's also fine. Make sure you get right into the creases of the bicep around the cannon there. And you can see now that this skin tone is really starting to look like the artwork. You can see how this watery consistency to all the paints makes them all run together and create this weeping flesh tone. Certainly down the back here, I want that to happen, and I'm going to get some more water. Now if you find that the skin layers you put down have started to dry and you can't blend them in like that as we have with the other layers, get some water on your brush, add it to the area that you want, and then dip the red in. And you see how that red then starts to run through the miniature. Very much similar to how it would do so if the Guilliman flesh was there. You can go back to Guilliman flesh if you still have some on your wet palette and blend that back through. So similar to what we did with the witch burner, where we were wet blending and using the properties of the wet paint to aid us in what we were doing, that's all I'm now doing. So now I'm going back to Guilliman flesh when I need it, or the Guilliman flesh and Carroburg Crimson wash. I'm picking that up when I need it and just applying it where I would like it to look more bruised, and also to blend between the areas where there's quite a lot of blood. So like that there, just blend that up into that. So we're still leaving some of that rakarth flesh there, but then this hand, I want that pretty much covered in blood. I like the idea that my Brazen Bull is just really getting his hands dirty, and that black that we have there, that's still showing through. Don't know if you can see there on the video very well. Let me just bring the lights a bit further there. There you are. That black showing through there. That's fine, because all I'm going to do is go back to my Flesh Tearer's Red, get a very heavy dollop of pure Flesh Tearer's Red straight from the pot, go to that hand where you can see that black, and douse the hand in blood. Can you see that there? So now all his hand is just covered Could be his blood. It's probably someone else's though. And then we go to areas where we want this blood to be pooling, and we put it on thick in those areas. So under his arm, I've missed some of the black there, so I'm going to go back. So my flesh tear is red. Again, pure flesh tear is red. And if you can see there, no, it's not letting me show you on the camera, but there's a small gap where I haven't collected, or I haven't painted. So I'm just going to go over that there and make his side look very, very, very sore. There we go. So now we can leave that to dry. So what we're now going to move on to is to darken down that gold even more. So what I've done here is I've mixed up 2 parts black templar contrast to 6 parts Reichland flesh shade, and you can see it creates this very murky, dark, muddy colour. That's exactly what we need. So as you can see, I've gone around the miniature a little more and made that skin look a bit more weeping and a bit more sore. So now what we're going to do is go around and, without too much on our brush, because this is a very dark wash, we just brush this into the recesses of the gold, and as you can see, it really deepens that gold after the Reichland's also been on it earlier on in the video. So we join back now as that wash is drying, and what I've done now is I've added a large brushful of pure black templar in to that 6:2 wash, and I'm using very small amounts of it to darken up areas of the armour, almost as if we were darkening up a silver rather than a gold. And the reason for that is because we want very, very dark shadows for when we come to our AK Interactive colour later. But it's important that we build these up slowly, because we don't want to overdo them, and we can correct one step at a time. But if we have to correct a lot of mistake steps, then it becomes a bit of an issue. Wick off any large blobs that are pooling so they don't cause big black blobs on the mini, and leave that to dry, and we'll be back when it does. So in this step I've moved my wet palette to one side and I'm using the lid as a dry palette. We've now got the AK Interactive Old Bronze and I'm applying that in small areas to the gold of the miniature to buff them up. And as you can see, this creates a little bit of a sheen, so it's going over some of those burnished, tarnished areas we created earlier, and we're brightening up that mini. So we're leaving a lot of those tarnished marks in the recesses, and go around the mini, put that on where you would like it to be highlighted, where you would like it to shine more, and then back when that's dried. So here we are now to try and add the finishing touches to that Brazen Bull. So what we're now going to do is touch up the hooves, and we're going to return my wet palette, going to the larger shade brush, and I'm going to go with my black templar contrast, bit of a blob of it, tiny bit of water on my brush along with it, so I have a nice watered down contrast paint, and I just paint that over the hoof and the fur. We'll probably need a couple of coats of this over the fur. So we'll wait for that to dry and we'll add another coat in a moment. But while that is waiting to dry, I'll close up my black templar and I'll go to my flesh tearers red. Just get this straight from the pot, and all we're going to do now is just pick out all these nice cables leading to his tank. So there we are. While those cables are drying from their first coat, what I'm also going to do is go around all the bottom of the skirt and pick out all those tassels in that nice flesh tearers red. There we are, and we're back. So while those are all drying, let's just take a look at the miniature. At the moment, once those hooves are dry, we'll have a second coat onto the hooves. We'll do a second coat onto this set of cables. But that's all coming together quite nicely now. So let's get those last things finished up. What I'm going to do now is hit those cables with a wash of Carroburg Crimson straight from the pot. And then also go around all these tassels and do the same. So a nice, generous coat of Carroburg Crimson goes on to all those cables. It doesn't matter if you get the Carroburg Crimson onto anything like the tank there, because all it will do is reinforce that bloody and injured effect on the bull. And then down onto the tassels, just darken them up slightly. And then for the hooves, we're just going to get that scale 75 black and apply it directly to the hooves, but not the fur, as then that will make them both look distinct to each other and give us the impression of a nice dark hoof. And that is all the painting on our Brazen Bull done. So join me in a second and we'll get to buffing. So you did hear me correctly. What we're going to do is get a bit of tissue and over the areas where you've put that true metallic, just give them a good buff. So I'll show you on this side of the flame cannon there. Let's buff this so you can see it in real time. And as you can see there, it's now giving that mirror effect. So if you go around the whole model and do that, once that's done, we will join you on the turntable. And there we are, that is our Brazen Bull in all his glory. So if you'd like to know more about the Lions of Jabir or the Jabirian Alchemists, click the links to your left. Alternatively, if you'd like to see how to gap fill the gap in that arm on the Brazen Bull, click the video link to your right where I talk over the model and its construction. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all soon.